So, right, that's just one of literally thousands and thousands of processes that are going on in our body all the time, about which we really pay little attention, but shape our experience of the world. And so we're in this stream of physiological sensation, memory, emotion, intellect, reason, and it's just washing over us. And from that stream, certain things bubble up. Sometimes we know why, sometimes we have no idea why. Everybody's felt this, right? You're walking down the street and you go, I'm pissed off. I don't know why I'm pissed off. Or you get up in the morning and you go, God, I'm sad. Why? Of all of this, why am I sad? Right? It's part of this, it's just so many mechanisms at work. And so he says, this has a surprisingly large amount of implication for philosophy. He says, one, the notion that we have any direct experience of the world is clearly wrong. Clearly, totally, 100% wrong-headed. Because we really don't have we have our experience of the world. But that the notion that our experience of the world corresponds to any kind of reality with a capital R is just more or less silly. It just can't possibly be, when even the most basic thing like sound comes and goes. When train tracks join in the distance, we know that's not true, but that's how we perceive it. How many of our other perceptions are more or less misleading us in the sense of absolute truth, capital T, idealist truth? He argues so much that you may as well just forget about that. And if you read the Principles of Psychology, it's a miracle we can cross a room. I mean, really, because the body, you're like, how do we do that? It really is astounding what's actually happening, as opposed to what we imagine, we think must be happening. It turns out, no, it's all wrong. I wish we could just talk about it all night. So he says, anyway, so two things grow out of this. One, habit and attention. A lot of things do, but in Principles of Psychology. He says, because of this, because of the stream of consciousness, because there's so much that we could pay attention to, what we're doing in childhood, and in fact all of our lives, is acquiring habits that allow us not to pay attention to things. This is what habits do. They train us to screen things out. And they've done a lot of tests with this with people who drive cars, right? When you first learn to drive a car, it's a little nerve-wracking because you're trying to pay attention to everything, right? That's because you do not have the habit of car driving. When kids try to learn to walk, right, they're like, ooh, I've got to put my heel down, and my foot, and they forget to stand and they go clunk on the ground, right? If you try to think about every aspect of walking, what you do is you fall down. You can run this experiment with beer, by the way. That's more or less true. But with kids, this is what they have to do. That's why they're so hilarious. Because they're like, how dumb are you? You just do it. But that's not helpful, because until you acquire the habit of doing something automatically, you have to think about it. What habit does is frees our mind from thinking about any kind of process that really we don't want to pay attention to. So how many people have driven somewhere, got there, and then just realized they arrived? Which is to say, you basically paid no attention at all. And you're like, holy crap, here I am. Right? Because from a terrifying experience, cars everywhere, I got to brake, oh no, gas, wait, what's going on, to, you're just there. You don't know what's going on, right? You just arrive all of a sudden, like you're transported. But we can do that because we don't pay attention. James says, how many people remember what order they brushed their teeth in? Right? What leg of your pants do you put on first? Most people will do this. Physiologically, we remember it. It's written into our bodies, but we don't have to think about it, so we don't pay any attention to it. But if you give us a pair of pants, it's not like we stand there and go, ooh, left, right, left, right, left, right. This is the function of habit. He said if we knew how large a part habit played in our effective functioning in the world, we would be much more careful with developing good habits. He really believed in this. He suffered, particularly when he was younger, from debilitating psychological and physical problems. He was a bit of a hypochondriac, very depressive, injured his back seriously. And he struggled with that. And one of the ways he overcame this was in part through force of will, and in part through trying to develop good habits to deal with it. And in retrospect, you realize, oh, much of my physical and mental anxiety was outgrowth of sort of very poor personal habits. But he says, you don't want to think about that. That's the whole key. You can do something without thinking about it, and it's good for you, works for you, then great. If you have a habit that doesn't work for you, that's debilitating or injures you in some way, oh, it's hell to change. You don't want to acquire those. Basically, he says, if you have it, well, now you got to break it. And boy, we all know that's not a lot of fun. Because he says it's literally written into your physical body, just like being able to put your pants on without thinking about it, without brushing your teeth without thinking about it. We can do these things, we don't think about it. That's the purpose. Why? Because there's so much coming at us. The stream is so overwhelming that we have to do that. If we don't do that, we become confused or disoriented, which is what people report, right? Sometimes you just feel confused and disoriented. You don't know what to pay attention to. If you go to a foreign country or a new place, all this new stuff, and you're just like, wow, I have to pay attention to everything. You can't do that. That's the debilitating side of the stream. If you try and take too much of it in at once, you get overwhelmed. The flip side of habit is attention. He said, we also have the capacity, very limited by the way, but we have the capacity to pay attention to certain parts of the stream. Right? If I could do anything, I could wave my hand. Right? I could say, pay attention to my hand. Right? Normally you probably wouldn't pay that much attention to them. When I said focus on the teacup, you know what we could do? We all looked at the teacup. See, now this is hugely important. A lot of animals do not have this capacity. They cannot selectively focus their attention. Their attention is focused automatically. And so what this allows us to do is alter, again, our thoughts and also alter our natural habits. The example I love is, anybody ever played tennis? So when you play tennis, particularly if you play doubles, but you always want to hold your racket a little bit to your backhand because you can pull the racket forward faster than you can move the racket back. And so you always hold it a little bit off. Because theoretically you can get the ball 50% of the time on either side. This gives you the highest chance of an effective return. Now, this is very unnatural. Right? And so, when I learned to play tennis with my brother, we would play doubles, and I would be at the net, and I would hold it like this. And he would walk up behind me with a tennis racket and hit me in the back. I would go, ah! This turned out to be very effective. Of focusing my attention. And pretty soon, you hold that racket at a slight cant to your back. That's where that racket goes all the time.
You feel the pain every time you do it?
No. I feel the fear of the pain. Right? I go like this, I go, damn. But this is our capacity to focus on something selectively, right? I would forget. I'd go like this, bad habit. Pain, okay, that's right, focus on this. And then for a while I'd focus on it. I'd pay attention, make sure you're doing this right. It becomes a habit. This seems trivial. And it seems pretty much common sense. And William James talks a lot about common sense. But what it means is we can selectively rewrite our physical and mental and emotional interface with the world. Completely reorient to an astounding degree. That plasticity of the human experience is what makes us essentially, James argues, human. The ability to focus our attention, change not just something about us, but change our whole perception of the world, and hence the world, as we understand it and can experience it. To the point where we can rewrite it in our physical body so we don't think about it anymore. That's just how we are. We can remake ourselves. I mean, not entirely, but to an unbelievable degree. If you learn a foreign language, impossible, pretty soon you don't think about it. If you learn to play a musical instrument, it's hard, you think about it. As soon as you can stop thinking about it, you're in business. Right? But those are totally different activities that we can write into our physical and mental systems. And by the way, James argues and proves pretty systematically that you literally are changing your physical body when you do this. When someone learns to play the guitar or the piano, you see someone doing something fast or very effortlessly, you are physically incapable of doing that when you begin studying. You cannot do it. You do not have the nerve, tendon, or muscle, or mental connections in your brain to make that happen. It's not physically possible for you. What you do when you practice is you rewrite your nerve structure, the actual physical structure of your brain, and the nerve tendons and connections of your body are changed. We're unbelievably plastic in that sense, malleable. But most importantly, by our own will, we can focus our attention on things. And so this is his notion. He says, look, we have this selective encounter with the world. It's screened and it's overwhelming. And we try and deal with this through the use of habit, which screens out a lot of stuff automatically so we don't think about it. And then by attention, which is our capacity to focus on any aspect of the world that we choose, for at least a short period of time. And then apply that attention to change other aspects of our perception of the world. That's only three of the chapters from an 1,100-page work. But this is, I think, the core of some of the key elements. But what this suggests, he argues straightforwardly, is that the world is in fact malleable to us. There is no fixed, transfinite, absolute world to which we want to reference to get solutions to things or answers. That doesn't exist. The world is plastic because we're plastic. There's nothing to appeal to nail stuff down. Right? When Russell was trying to nail down mathematics, and so if we can prove that's right, then we can build everything from there. That's the thing we can grip onto. Wittgenstein's language, they were really reaching for that. James is like, no, it's not there. It doesn't exist. You can't have it. What you get instead is this remarkable flexibility. So this leads to the philosophical concept of pragmatism, which is not originated with James, but he provided all of the heavy lifting and explanation. And have people heard of pragmatism? That this is the idea? And James argued, look, pragmatism is simply a method. And it's a method that says your experiences and your ideas are experiences, by the way, and the facts and the evidence that you gather structure the way you look at the world, and if those things help you get through the world, then they're good. They are, by his definition, true. And if they don't, then they're false, and you have to do something to get rid of them and change them and get more evidence to do something else. He says it's a method of a way of looking at the world. He says truth does not exist, truth is made. Truth becomes. It's verified through action. He says any notion, idea, fact, theory, philosophy that you have, as an example of this, that does not lead to action, not just action, mental action, action in the world, or change in behavior, has no content. So we always talk about, the ancients used to be dumb, they thought the world was flat. Now we're smart because we've learned that the world is a sphere. James would argue, do we behave any differently because the world is a sphere or if we're flat? As far as I know, I never have. Which means that this great piece of scientific discovery that's revolutionized everything, for me personally, makes no difference at all. Does anybody care? Right? Does anybody have any,
Yeah, I care.
You care?
I care. And you also do not know how that changes things in your mind. And so
Now,
it may make a difference to not.
it may make a difference that we're not aware of. Absolutely. But that is essentially no difference for us in our constructing of our philosophy, of the way we look at the world. And so we're taught things like the world isn't flat, the world is a sphere, but unless we're going to fly someplace ourselves,
Or sail.
or sail around the world, although people who sail, really ask yourself, Do you imagine the world as a sphere, or do you imagine it's continuously flat and you just happen to never fall off the edge? Right? I never imagine that I'm driving a car on a curved surface. That just never occurs to me. A lumpy surface, but I never feel like any sense, but because it's hard to experience that. Now, if I went into outer space and looked back, all of a sudden I'd be like, ooh, world sphere. I can experience that. Now it has much more meaning to me. But he says, this is what truth is. Truth is something that changes the way you act in the world. Philosophy is for life. If it works, then it's true for you. This is the definition of truth. Now, people hate this. They absolutely resist this fundamentally. One, because there's a notion, well, truth must be out there someplace. Certain things must be true. And James is like, well, you would think that were the case. And there's a lot of evidence for a lot of things to be true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are true. Right? So, I could think, trying to think, what's something that's obviously true? All men are mortal, right? We're all going to die. James says this is one of the problems we have is that we never do die. We never get around to dying ourselves. And because we never get around to dying ourselves, it's sort of hard to conceptualize. He says he thinks a lot of the problem that we have with dying is not the fear of dying, it's the fact that we have a hard time conceptualizing it because we never experience it. If we had died like 5 or 6 times, I think it would be no problem. Right? Like riding a bike. First time is terrifying. The last couple of days, no problem. Pretty soon it's as easy as riding a bike. It's just no problem. But that first one is the only one we get. So conceptually, it just baffles us at times because we have no experience of it. He says things that we have no palpable physical experience of baffle us continuously. And he says, so what happens is we're trying to create models in our mind, thoughts in our mind, that guide us through this unbelievably complex world that we experience, which may or may not be like the world that anybody else is experiencing. And so, what do? James argues, and this is the part that I think is sort of the least evidence that he has for it, but it's a reasonably strong argument, is he said, what we're trying to do with truth is minimize conflict in ourselves. That we don't like to have two ideas that create continual strain. And so what we want to do, so if we're going on our life, everything is happy. Let's say, I'm driving my Hummer, right? I'm happy, I'm whistling, I got my Hummer, I'm getting 3 miles a gallon, I don't care what you're running, and I'm happy, and then all of a sudden, I start reading about global warming and the price of oil, and I'm like, see, damn. See, it's not that the Hummer is a problem, and it's not that the world is going to, basically be environmentally destroyed. That's the problem. For me, the problem is I'm torn. I feel the dissonance between, the planet, I'm sort of in favor of that. I love my Hummer, right over here. What do I do? And he says, what we'll then do is try to restructure our concept to eliminate the dissonance. We're not interested in truth. He says, look, our interest in truth is so small it's hard to imagine. Truth with a capital T. He says, what we really want is some other facts or something else that will help us get rid of that cognitive dissonance, that feeling of strain, the feeling of not knowing what to do. Am I doing the right thing? Right? Don't you feel that debilitating? All of a sudden you're thinking, is this right? Should I do this? And then at some point you think, okay, I just don't want to be like this anymore. I'm going to come up with something so I don't have to feel this way anymore. And then whatever it is we come up with, James says, look, it doesn't rewrite everything that came before. It's grafted onto it. It's a new element in an ongoing growth of our understanding of the world. He says it never displaces anything. He says, philosophically, everyone is a conservative because we save as much as we possibly can. And we let go with the smallest amount, and we graft on the smallest possible amount to smooth things out again. Right? And he says, this is what truth is. Truth is the thing that allows us to get through the world, through our lives, with the least amount of mental sort of torment and, strain and pressure that we can. Important to note, though, that where this strain and pressure comes from is not just the external world. This has often been interpreted by people as saying, oh, well, this is just, if you make money, you win. And therefore, you're a good person, because your philosophy works. He said, this strain can come from any number of places. He says it can come from the person who's sitting there going, all I'm doing is making money, I'm really bored. The money is good, being bored is bad. Money is good, bored is... Now you're going to do something. Because you don't want to put up with that. Right? People, are bored on the farm, and so they go to the city to become lawyers, and corporate lawyers leave the city to go buy farms. And neither of them are wrong. To James, it's all correct. But they're each feeling a different part of the human experience and a different part of the stream of consciousness, and they're trying to decide, what part is right? What part works for me? And again, we tend to dislike this, and then James was attacked resolutely then, and people are attacked resolutely now for this, because they say, well, how do you have any ethics or morals? How do you have any sense of right or wrong? And James says, well, it's tricky. And so he wrote sort of a big book in pursuit of these questions called The Varieties of Religious Experience, which, if you want to think about it, if 1,100 pages of the Principles of Psychology wasn't enough for you, it's really the third 800-page volume, which makes it a roundish 2,000-page read. Highly recommended, but you want to set aside some time. And what the varieties of religious experience, as far as I know, again, no other work I've ever seen even approaches this. But James says, look, here's the thing. Empiricists, scientists, whatever you want to call them, sit down and say, there's no evidence that God exists, so there's no God. And James is like, but people have all these experiences that they say are very religious. They're not lying. They're serious. So we either have to treat them as mentally deranged, or we can take them seriously and ask, what is the nature of their experiences? That's pragmatism. It's not right or wrong, it's what is it? Let's understand it, let's think about it. And so he has an 800-ish page long book called The Varieties of Religious Experience, when he goes through he is just encyclopedic. Says, Christian mystics, Buddhists, Hindus, the scholastic tradition, the meditative tradition, hallucination with drugs, isolation, wandering just every possible report. He uses historical reports, he does experiments, he